Zet die aan. Welkom bij een ander gesprek, nieuw gesprek voor de Trainen podcast. En dit keer voor de tweede keer met Nathalie Pattyn. Spreek het goed uit, hè, Pattyn? Dat was vorige keer ook al mijn... Ja. En we gaan het hebben over het Handbook of Mental Performance. Ik heb het eventjes hier zo voor degenen die kijken. Dit is het handboek en hij is te koop. En volgens mij zijn er zelfs chapters, nou, dat weet ik wel zeker, zijn downloadable. Maar het is natuurlijk een mooi boek voor in de boekenkast. En Nathalie is een Human Performance Professor at the Royal Military Academy, Belgium, and invited researcher at the University, oh dit is Frans, University de Montreal, Canada. now I pronounce it very, very weird. And today we talk about the Handbook of Mental Performance with great chapters. So thank you for talking with me about the book. This is quite a big book, so to speak, with a lot of topics. And can you tell me why did you write a book, and was it a big adventure?
It definitely was a big adventure, and it does cover a lot of topic because we've tried. Actually, I didn't write the book; I edited the book with my colleague Robin Hofer. And what we've tried was to provide a comprehensive overview regarding mental performance for all professionals either doing research or practitioners in the field attempting to, let's say, increase mental performance in their target population, more specifically in high performance domains. So the idea was to span the whole bandwidth from the scientific background, what is mental performance, what are the building blocks, and up to the tools and techniques that are currently available to try and influence it, but also to tap into the practical experience and expertise of the author team, because we have over 20 people. We have decades of experience of people who are either coaches, psychologists, physicians, and who have dedicated years and years of their lives to this goal, to creating mental performance programs. And so it's not only about providing a scientific overview, but also a tips and tricks approach. Like, look, if I had known 20 years ago what I know now, these are the mistakes I wouldn't make. Yeah. And these are the things I would really pay attention to. So we've tried to span that whole spectrum because we thought that was a gap in the current knowledge field. And especially with the boom of commercial applications in this domain, some backed up by robust science, some less, most with a clearly defined business plan and definitely a viable outcome financially, but not necessarily taking into account, let's say, the priority of, is this meaningful to the client, to the operator, to the person you're supposed to serve? And so that was the rationale behind this book. Yeah. And so it became quite a collection in the end, but that was also the goal. It was to have all this information available in one source.
Yeah, and I think you succeeded. It's a great book, and I myself found it incredible to have all those things together in one book. Can we just start with the title?
Yes.
Because mental performance, and we have a lot of terms: mental performance, mental health, resilience, what have you more, performance psychology, and so on and so on. And I was in a group with the Dutch military, and we just talked only about mental performance and mental fatigue, and then even then the definitions were not as clear. But what is mental What is mental performance? What is your definition?
But in a nutshell and very simply, it's the way people, the efficiency with which they handle information. So it's the thoughts, the emotions, and the basis of behavior, basically, but on the mental side. So that's also something we emphasize in the book. It's like, well, we know that to perform optimally, you need proper sleep, you need proper diet, you need proper exercise. But those topics we are not going to cover because we have to reduce the scope at some point, and also because there are a lot of other sources that cover those really well. So we are going to focus on the techniques and the background related to how you think, how you feel, and how you behave.
Yeah, that's clear, and of course I understand that. Well, if we talk about them, there are a lot of things you talk also in the book about being aware that performance is holistic, but writing such a book is reductionistic because you cannot cover all the things and so on and so on. But if we just talk about mental performance, I know you in the book you write about it, but for mental performance, is it just cognitive performance? Is it cognitive performance, or is it also emotional performance? Because also emotions play a big role, and of course there are big debates about emotions, especially the works of Lisa Feldman Barrett, at least have inspired me a lot. But if we talk about mental performance in the way you described just before, are we talking about or also emotion? You already mentioned it, but
Yeah, so we didn't want to draw that line because you cannot separate both. And this is like from a hardcore science point of view, this is a discussion that has flared up in cognitive research at the end of the 20th century, late 70s until mid 90s. With regard to what comes first, cognition or emotion.
yeah,
Do we first feel or do we first think? And it's a discussion that died down with no definitive answer because it's an artificial subdivision, because you cannot separate your thoughts from your feelings, because as soon as you appraise, as soon as you evaluate a stimulus, new information, whatever, there is an emotional component
yeah,
to it. Because you take your own subjectivity, you take your values and everything. And so that's really something we didn't want to go into, because it might be, let's say, an interesting debate in fundamental cognitive science. It is of no relevance whatsoever to the field of practitioners. And there is now a consensus in applied performance research that to actually perform well in the long run, you need both, and you need both to be integrated. And for example, something that we often see in elite performers is that a coping strategy with a lot of pressure is to dissociate from one's emotion, to rationalize everything, and that might work for a while, but it will backfire.
yeah,
It will come bite you, and sometimes really, really badly. So yeah, if you strive for integration, and I immediately need to make a sidestep here, because in the beginning you said we have several terms: mental performance, mental health, resilience. Actually, mental performance and mental health, and that's why we dedicated a whole chapter to it, are two different things, because
mm,
we all know high performers who are not healthy people. We all know high performers, overachievers, to whom this overachieving is actually a coping mechanism, and a very valorized one. from a societal point of view. I mean, if you deal with some fundamental personality scar with alcohol or drugs, everybody will look down on you. If you deal with it with over-investing in athletic performance or in your professional performance, everybody will look up to you. But the fundamental mechanism is the same. And you may, when I talk about this, I often say, like, think about it, who in his or her right mind would one day wake up and say, I am going to sacrifice everything that makes life worthy, like human connection, taking care of myself, making sure I'm a healthy human being. I'm going to put that all aside. I'm going to inflict massive pain on myself and dig deeper and deeper to know how much further I can go. Who in his right mind ever said that? No one. So if you're willing to go to these ends, well, you may wonder why. And it's a question not many people are willing to ask, because just the outcome of the process is so satisfying and comfortable in its own discomfort. And I'm not belittling the values and the ideal and the moral qualities it takes to be an overachiever in a certain domain. I'm just saying we have to be cautious, because, you know, the vision of the linear continuum of performance, which is often illustrated with a color code, you know, you're in the red when everything crumbles down, and you're in the green when it works well, and you're in the blue when it's optimal. Well, that might be an adequate illustration with regard to health, but health and performance are not on the same continuum, not at all. And if you work with elite performers, you know, because you've seen them.
So what you are saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, mental performance and mental health is not the same, necessarily not the same. And I know that Amy Adler, when she was here, also talked about clinical versus performance psychology. Or it was not Amy Adler, it was Christian Itterboll from Norway who did his dissertation. So these are, okay. And okay, so we're talking, and now we are talking about mental performance in the book, but also, do you also talk about mental health in the book? I think so.
Yes, so we decided we needed a chapter to discuss this sometimes tension field, because as a practitioner, there will always be a point where you will find yourself in a position where you're like, okay, if we're looking solely at the quality of your performance and the outcome, making you sustain, making you stronger, making you more efficient, there is one way to go. But if we look at your health and well-being, there is another way to go. And sooner or later, you will always find yourself in that dilemma.
We can only look at the Ukrainian soldiers, because there is no, they are not questioned, is it good for your health? Just sacrificing your health for performance, because
it's exactly that's also why we have a chapter spent on ethical caveats, because this is a tension that will arise at any point. And then the question rises, are you as a practitioner working for the employer, the organization, the team, or are you working for the individual? And this is also something that needs to be, if you want to build the trust relationship with the performer you are coaching, guiding, treating, this is something that needs to be discussed. And also because sometimes people need to be, because people will want to sacrifice their health and well-being, because that's let's say a basic feature of overachievers. It's the willingness to go beyond what would be good for them. But it's that, like, as it's also something we discuss in the implementation chapter in elite military units. It's a very different thing to have a practitioner that has a clinical background, where you have, let's say, the ethics of the duty of care, and a practitioner that doesn't have that clinical background. And for example, you have, and one example we discussed in the chapter on restorative techniques is the Wim Hof method, which is very popular and which works wonders for thousands of people, not because it is such a revolutionary thing, but it's a very smart packaging of how to confront discomfort, which is something that is absent in our current society, in our westernized world, because we are very privileged, and discomfort has slowly ebbed out of our lives. And of course, with such a method, you learn to confront discomfort again, which of course increases your quality of life. However, there are a couple of contraindications, for example, to ice bathing or to hyperventilating, which are based on the physiological effects. And if you sell this method as a standalone tool, like people would buy a phone, for example, then it's dangerous. Because basically you're placing something that can have profound physiological effects in the hands of people that are not trained to recognize the potential side effects and the people in which this would not be beneficial. And so that's this whole conundrum of ethics. And that's also why a lot of practitioners find physicians difficult people, because they never give a straight answer. And they are often the people who will say, no, we are not going to do that. Because they have this kind of a watch keeper status, thinking that is this actually good for you? Because you know, the first principle of medical ethics is
do not harm.
First, do no harm. And of course, as a military physician, I also know that sometimes you have to admit a little harm in the short term to allow for a better outcome in the long term. And because if you look, for example, at training of elite units, well, yes, you need to put people under pressure, because if you don't do it in training and they are faced with it in reality and they cannot cope with it, then they put themselves in great danger, and they put their whole team in great danger, and they put a high-stake mission in jeopardy. And so yes, in training you have to accept that it will hurt at some point.
Do you think that today there is a good balance between delivering some stressors, but also maintaining health in the long term? Do you think we are on a, because there have been situations and days and teams where, you know, you could easily make an argument that you kill people in training. And not literally, but also, but do you think do we have a better balance now in the training while delivering discomfort, but also?
I'm not sure, because I think as a society we are extremely risk averse. I also think that, and it's human, I mean, ever since the marshmallow experiment, we know that people struggle with delayed gratification. And so people who create a training process, or we also have the issue that everything goes faster, and to see good results, you need to invest and you need time. And if you want to see results fast, they will not necessarily be the best you can have. And so I think this search for immediate gratification, and if you take the example, for example, of training courses in the military or in police elite units, well, we struggle with recruitment. That's the first problem. Beggars can't be choosers. If you have 100 persons from whom you would like to retain 10, or if you have 500 persons from whom you would like to retain 10, it's not the same thing.
No.
You cannot allow for the same selection to occur. That is just a fact of life.
Yeah.
And we all know that there is a conflict of interest between the needs of the field and where people want the selection to be strict and the training to be strict in order for, let's say, the people they get in the units to be of a certain standard, and the political pressure to deliver, where, well, we need 10 new people, we're going to get 10 new people, even if we have to lower certain standards for that. Now, you can waffle on for hours regarding those standards, whether it's a societal evolution or changes in education systems and whatsoever. But the same discussions are happening in every country. So you know it's a broader evolution. And so have we reached a good balance? I'm not sure. If I hear what people say in the field, I don't think so.
Yeah, and what do you mean by, do you mean that the training is too harsh or the standards are too low? Are all these things happening?
No, I think we as a society, we are risk averse and we are pain averse. There's a Korean scholar who wrote an essay called The Palliative Society. And it's very enlightening because it's like, well, you know, the saying, no pain, no gain. Well, it's a bit of an oversimplification, and I'm not a massive fan. As a physician, I'm not a massive fan of letting people in pain. However, I also know if you want to train to achieve a goal, and if you want to train people to sustain hardship, you need pain. If you don't use pain, they will not learn to endure it, they will not learn to overcome it, and in the end, they will not be capable of performing beyond normal limits, which is kind of the definition of an elite unit.
Yeah. So what would be the ideal solution? In the sense that, because in physical training it seems so obvious, because you just have the supercompensation, the progressive overload principles, and just if you do it right, you put just enough pressure and pain that the system adapts and you become stronger and better and so on. And of course, there we also have overtraining.
Yes.
Yes. But
which is a combination of physical and mental factors. But I think the ease of physical training when compared to mental hardship is that you can easily measure how much is too much.
Yeah.
I mean, you have markers, you have physiological markers to know when someone has had enough. And when it comes to mental performance and hardship, all you can rely on is basically what people tell you.
Yeah.
And by definition, they will always, if you push people beyond their limits, they will always say it's too much. So how much is too much? And I think that is what makes great trainers in training programs. And actually, my very first platoon commander when I went into boot camp in the military, to me was one of the factors that motivated me to go study psychology during medical school, because I thought, wow, this guy is able, whenever I feel and not me, like the 30 others as well. You know, when you think you're dead and you can't do anything anymore and you can cry from fatigue and you fall over, and then you continue for another 6 hours, and it's like, but you didn't think this was physically possible. But it's a fine art of actually being able to take people over their boundaries without completely breaking them down.
Yeah.
And I think that is like the holy grail everybody is looking for,
Yeah.
that balance. And it's not something we've been able to conceptualize yet. It's expertise in its truest form. It's something that some individuals possess, that we've tried to describe and quantify, but that we still can't pin down, you know, as a set of rules, like, and if this happens, you do this, and if this happens, you do that.
It's art and science.
Yes, exactly. It's a very subtle and complex process. And I think a lot of people who master this wouldn't be able to explain it either, because it's all implicit knowledge.
Yeah. So before I want to go to the chapter about, this is a difficult word for me, restorative. Is it, how do you pronounce it? Restorative? That sounds better.
Yeah.
So I tried to get a sense of what you mean by mental performance, and we talked about that it is necessary for the book to, you know, not to talk about everything else, physical and emotional and so on. You also talked about the difference between mental performance and mental health, that there are some trade-offs and some, you know, where they go away. And we also talked a little bit about emotion and cognition, that they are inseparable. Before we move on to the beautiful chapter, there is one thing I struggle with a little bit, and not only me, and that's, for example, in the chapter you talk about restorative techniques, recovery, restoration, but there is also rest. Are these different things? For example, for example, I'm practicing mindfulness myself, but of course not in the middle of a kickboxing match, and before and so on. So can you separate it into like just in time recovery methods, or and then
No, because that doesn't work. See, that's
okay.
that's the trick. So the restorative techniques, it's something that I like because it's a very moral story. Like, there's no free lunch. If you didn't do your homework, if you didn't sweat the small stuff, if you don't practice regularly to master that skill, you will not be able to use it when you need it.
No, okay. So, but I mean a little bit different. For example, there was some research by Judith P. Anderson from Toronto, and she developed the breath resets method, just a breath prolonged exhalation. Which is when officers are in the, you know, in the fight, so to speak, and but of course, and well, technical breathing takes too long if you are arresting control, and that's the time scale, and of course you have to practice all those things. But are still my question is there a difference between what do you mean by let's ask it otherwise? This chapter, restorative techniques, what is it about? Is it in the moment techniques, or is it after the moment? Is it lifestyle? What is it?
Actually, it's all of the above, because we had very lively debates within the team. Because, for example, mindfulness, some argue, is not a technique, it's a way of life. And it is true. If you are able to practice mindfulness and to master it, it will infuse every part of your life, because it's something, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You cannot master that open monitoring aspect, which is the most difficult thing. And this is why everybody starts with focused attention. But you cannot do the open monitoring and non-judgmental witnessing of your environment and switch it off, because it's just not how it works. And that's also why I say it's not it's not a tool you take out of your toolbox, which is the way we often sell those things to operators. Like, okay, I'm going to teach you this, and if it fits, and if you feel it's useful, then you can use it. But the truth is, and that's also why, for example, on the part regarding yoga, the most convincing studies come from the Indian army. Why? Because it is part of the culture. And so it's like these guys don't do 1 hour of yoga a day. They live in an environment and a culture that fosters this, which of course makes it's different, as you say, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's not a technique. Now, of course, you can condense, let's say, all of these to punctual interventions that can actually be helpful in the moment or in the immediate preparation. But these will only show their full potential, their full effect, if they are effectively, let's say, the tip of the iceberg, but if you have the iceberg underneath. Yeah. So if you only learn tactical breathing, and if you only apply it in the heat of the moment when you need it, it will be less effective. Because basically, why have we grouped all these techniques together, mindfulness, yoga, relaxation, and breathing? Why do we call them restorative? Because these are all techniques that will increase the parasympathetic activation. So that's the branch of the autonomic nervous system that is responsible for restoration, for building up resources. So the sympathetic branch is the spending branch, the parasympathetic branch is the building branch. And all these techniques actually impact that balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic system. And what we see in a lot, and now I think specifically military, in a lot of operators, is that you have, due to the lifestyle and the fast-paced operational life, you have a disbalance. You have a constant overactivation of the sympathetic system, which is like the most likely physiological basis for what is now termed, the operator syndrome, which is a whole conundrum of symptoms and disturbances, for example, sleep disturbances. Well, if you are in a hypervigilant state constantly, if you never allow your body and your mind to actually switch gear,
switch off,
yeah, then of course it's gonna there's a very heavy price tag to that. And so these restorative techniques, they allow for this balance to switch and to regain some parasympathetic tone that has been suppressed by years of training and conditioning, learning people to always be ready. And so that's the whole point of that chapter.
So if I'm correct, I hear what you're saying, but these are how do you call it, traits or states or skills or however you call them, which you have to practice. There is no free lunch. You have to practice. You have to integrate them, and then they also can show up even in immediate.
Yeah, because if, for example, if you take a very practical tool, heart rate variability training, like this is something, if you are used to it, you can impact your heart rate variability quite quickly. If you are not used to it, you can practice paced breathing, but it won't have the same profound effect. And so it's a skill. And just as with any language or motor skill, it's something that you need to teach your body, basically.
And can I wanted to ask you, can skills become states? Because we have always a state and trait, like
I think a skill by definition is trainable.
Yeah.
And if it's trainable, it's not a trait. because a trait is a stable characteristic. A skill can become, because, you know, in the taxonomy of training, you have the different stages, and the last stage is when it's automated, when you perform it without thinking, without even sometimes being able to explain how you're doing it, because it has become so ingrained.
Yes,
that
that's
it's
what
automatic.
I mean. Yeah.
So yes, that it can definitely become, every skill can reach that stage.
Yeah. Now, before we talk about the techniques you mentioned, like mindfulness and so on, there is one thing, if I'm honest, when I'm reading this, which triggered me a little bit, and that is, and you talk about it explicitly in the book and so on and so on, but if we take all these things like mindfulness, like breathing, like yoga, like relaxation, my simple thought is just practice some good style of yoga and do it every day because everything is already in it. And
Yeah, but
I know you talk about it, of course. And
yeah, but it's also a matter of what approach fits best with you, with your audience. You know, it's a matter, it's branding, eh?
Yeah.
It's the way you pack it, because tactical breathing is one exercise of pranayama, which is the breathing branch of yoga. And so it's like, Pilates. Pilates is the physical component of hatha yoga, you know, the core training and everything, but it's just a different branding. Mindfulness is a Western branding of meditation, which was created because meditation, with its Buddhist roots, elicited some very negative responses from people. So it's actually taking the essence of the technique and selling it under another name.
And of course I understand it, and you also write about it, that if you take them apart, you can also do more rigorous research, of course, because then you can untangle the breathing from the other. So I understand it absolutely. And I also, when I was teaching SWAT teams here in the Netherlands, you know, I could not tell them to do yoga, but we could do a boxing training and then lying down on the back and doing tactical breathing exercises. So that's the branding part, of course. And okay, let's talk about mindfulness. And you write an introduction about what mindfulness is and the historical review. But for those who are not that fond of reading, what is your findings about mindfulness, and how could we use it in these performance domains?
So mindfulness, as I said, is funny because it's a lifestyle, and my colleague Diana Beach, who wrote the bulk of the mindfulness part, and who actually uses it as a practitioner with military units. She works for the US. And she says it's a lifestyle. It's not a technique.
No.
It is something that you learn like in a very small setting. And you know, some mindfulness instructors use like an object in your environment. A grape is a great classic, where you learn to focus on that object. But basically what you are learning, and I think in this day and age of hyper connectiveness, and the fact that the use of the digital environment is actually detrimental to our selective attention, because the way either commercial websites or social media feeds are built actually feeds into the inbuilt craving for novelty we have, and the dopamine brain. And so that selective attention is really a modality that is at risk in our current society. And this is what you train in mindfulness. Before you go to the stage where you can just witness your environment, both external and internal, without immediately reacting or judging, evaluating, just witnessing, before you reach that stage, you practice that focused attention. And one thing that is often used for focused attention is the breath, because it's something you always carry with you. And it's a win-win. You focus on something, so you train your selective attention, and you actually impact, let's say, your arousal balance by slowing down that breath and being more mindful of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, mindfulness is something easy to implement, because you can make it as holistic or as reductionist as you want. You can start on whatever space of the continuum you want, and you know it will have effects. It's similar to yoga, because when people think yoga, they think super flexible, bendy people in circus poses. But actually, you can have the benefits of yoga without the performance.
Yeah.
And as such, it is a very interesting thing to teach to high performers, because you have to refrain them and you have to tell them, no. Now you're rushing to what you think should be the result, but look, you're damaging that muscle group, and you're not able to breathe in the posture. So basically, you are not doing this right. This is not how it's supposed to be. And but I'm sidetracking from mindfulness.
No. So mindfulness, I really enjoyed. I don't know if I'm here. Oh, I'm sure you know the book from Amishi Jha.
Yeah.
And I think she also tried to reframe it a little bit, like talking about attention is maybe more, how do you call it, more accepted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because you have that. And of course, it's the macho culture we operate in. Anything that faintly reeks of softness and gentleness is met with defiance. But yeah, basically, it's attention. It's mastering your mind. And when you practice yoga is not, basically you learn for years to master your body in order to master your mind. The goal of yoga is to sit still on your meditation cushion.
Yeah. And in the chapter, so you talk about mindfulness, and what is your conclusion about it? Because did you found it? I read it, of course, but for those who listen, do you found it effective for high performance domains? And is there evidence? And
yeah, mindfulness is actually the technique where the most evidence is available. I think because it is such, let's say, it was already a translation of an existing technique being meditation to make it more acceptable in Western societies. And I think that was John Kabat-Zinn's life's work, in which he succeeded clearly. And it's also the one where you have in terms of evidence quality in the scientific literature, you have meta-analysis in several domains, be it therapeutic, be it performance enhancing. You have meta-analysis regarding mindfulness in military population, regarding mindfulness in athletic population. So that's the one where the evidence base is the most robust, because it is already simplified and well defined, and so it lends itself more easily to let's say our scientific methodology.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would definitely recommend using it.
What would be your advice? Because there's also a chapter in the book, implementing mental performance programs in elite military units. So now we know that it's effective, that there is the evidence. Do you have any thoughts about if you are a program manager for military or other domains? What is
Oh, this is such a big question. I'm sorry. I would how to implement it, but it's a chapter on itself, of course. But
it's not only a chapter, because it's something that we did, and so I can tell you it was 4 years of very hard work to implement to design a program and to implement it as a pilot project. I think the most important thing there is to actually listen to your audience. And that's why we advocate for embedded practitioners who are part of the culture. This is also why in our project team, we had former operators, because I think you need as much interface and a cross-pollination between, on the one hand, your technical experts regarding mental performance, and on the other hand, your client population. And for example, and my Danish colleagues who wrote, let's say, who were part of the author team of the book, they are the perfect example, because they are former operators who, when they finished their operational careers, went on to study psychology and to specialize in performance psychology, to actually come back to the unit or to higher levels in the military to design these kind of programs. And so I think this mix of people and the work ethics of serving the population. You're not serving the command, you're not serving your career, you're actually looking at the needs of the people you're working with and you're working for. And I think that's the most important, because and that's, as a technical expert, you need to know all those tools, you need to know what you have in your backpack, and then you need to, it's like a chef, you know, if you can cook, you can be in any kitchen with any ingredients, and you will be able to cook up something that people will eat. Well, designing a mental performance program is the same. You need to be a chef. If you cannot cook, you cannot just stand in front of your cupboard full of ingredients and then be like, I'm going to try a little bit of this and I'm going to try a little bit of that, because then you will need 20 years of trial and error before you actually come up with something people are like, oh yes, I will eat that.
Yeah, great. Also, two thoughts come up. That is, first, a perfect example of this is, I think, Christian Itterboll from Norway. He was a former team sniper.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work.
Yeah, and he did a PhD about developing performance psychology and so on in Norway in elite units. And I talked with him, and he also said that just by the fact that he knew the culture was a very important factor in the success of great.
Absolutely. And so, for example, if I look at the project we implemented in the Belgian unit, the fact that the involved practitioners, myself, the clinical psychologist, the physio, the PTI, all went on deployment with teams at various points, was also very significant to the success, because it's like, you know what their life is like. And so you can adapt. You can make sure the answers you come up with are relevant and feasible. Because you can come up with something that is very relevant but impractical to implement. And that's also something why that's also, if you, similarly to mindfulness is a lifestyle, well, if you want to have a human performance program in your unit, it has to be embedded in training. And that's something I'm really grateful to the cadre I worked with in our unit, because in all the deployments where I participated with regard to the human performance program, and I remember, for example, a CT course where they were very open to suggestions about, oh, let's include that exercise and then we can debrief it that way. And that's actually something that ties in to what we try to teach them with regard to self-regulation. And if you manage that level of collaboration, then it becomes a success, because then it is knowledge that is readily applicable and implementable by the operators. They see the relevance. They don't have to connect the dot themselves. You need to do that for them.
Yeah, and also from a didactical point of view, it's exactly what you're saying. You can also, you know, before they take a shot, they can do a breathing exercise, and before they go to sleep, they can do a body scan, whatever. What I mean by this is that's different than giving a siloed training.
Yeah.
And they have to great. Yeah, I think also, Then the next thing you talk about is relaxation, and you talk about Herbert Benson and the relaxation response. That's great, because I have this book for so many years, and he was really a pioneer, I think. The relaxation response, and then I talk about the different how do you call it, techniques. What are the most important thoughts about relaxations and the evidence for it, and how to design it?
Well, so mindfulness, relaxation, yoga, and breathing, we took them together because there is so much overlap.
Yeah.
And relaxation is actually, for me, the way in which it's all carved out separately is a reflection of society. And so relaxation is something that purely focuses on muscles and tone and trying to master that. But of course it's related to breathing. You cannot have relaxation without breathing. And breathing, and we talk about that in the scientific foundation chapter. Breathing is actually, when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, it is a historical name, but it is a historical name that has been proven wrong, because autonomic means outside of free will. And we have a window into the autonomic nervous system, and it is breathing. Because in our wake state, our breathing depends on the way we behaviorally control it. I can decide to hold my breath. I can decide to breathe diaphragmatically. And so I can influence my autonomic nervous system. I can influence my heart rate. I can influence my blood pressure. I can influence my galvanic skin response, the way I sweat, just by regulating breathing. And that's, you know, when you think of those spectacular research findings with yoga and very advanced yogis who can slow their breath, lower their body temperature, and be in an apparent state of death. Yes, it's possible. If you master this control over years and years and years of your life, it reaches that level of mastery. And so relaxation, again, is only a very small portion of that. Focusing on something that has, in its description, nothing to do with feelings or emotions or what. It's packed in a very rational way. It focuses on muscle tension. And so it's a component that has been branded that way.
Yeah, separately. And what is it, because you mentioned a lot of methods like progressive muscle relaxation, autogenic training. A new one for me was, and I want to investigate it, behavioral relaxation training. So there are a lot of methods. What's the goal of relaxation exercises? And yeah.
So we mention all these methods because, and that's also one of the overarching goals of the book, is to bring everything together and to tell people, look, you will see this name, but actually it's all relying on these mechanisms, and these are the effects, so that people actually, it's kind of trying to offer a comprehensive overview of a field that has become a maze. And it's the same thing with heart rate variability. You know, you have heart coherence, resonant frequency training, respiratory sinus arrhythmia, heart rate variability. And it's all, when it all boils down to one and the same process, but the names are so many that if you are not trained in the field, it's very hard to actually understand, but what is this in relation to this?
Yeah.
And with relaxation, it's the same. And of course, everybody that designs his or her own program will want to give it a specific name. But that is, I think, our role as technical expert is to analyze all these and to say, look, this is actually, none of it is bad. All of it is useful, but it all boils down to the same. So it doesn't, it's useless to start discussions about which one is better. No, they will all have the same effect. So if you prefer, it's like you have to eat fruit every day. Well, if you don't like apples, don't eat apples. There's enough of other fruit.
Yeah. So choose the things.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's also in your what you're talking about, that individuals differ in which techniques are more suitable to them. And so on. You given that the group has influence on relaxation practice, and so on and so on. So people can look it up, and yeah. And the third one is breathing, and that's a huge topic. I just wrote an article in Dutch. I can send it to you about breathing, and I was lucky enough to also interview some people. And what I mentioned, Judith Anderson from Canada, who did some applied research in police high pressure situation and so on. But yeah, it's the same, of course. We already talked about it. There are many methods. They're all related, integrated, and so on. But because we have this beautiful paper, what would you like to say about breathing and why it's important in these settings?
Well, so for me, my go-to source, if you want to reach a broad audience, would be the book from James Nestor.
Yeah.
Breath.
It's this one, I think, for those who are watching. I have it only in Dutch, but
yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Because he gives a very, very he writes very pleasantly, which is already nice.
Yeah, it's a skill. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to tell your audience that our book doesn't read that pleasantly. Our book is an academic reference textbook, so don't take it on holiday to read by the pool, because it won't be pleasant. But it's breathing, as I said, it's the window to our autonomic nervous system. So for me, it's the paramount technique if you want to influence psychophysiological responses. Because basically, if you look at everything from mindfulness to relaxation to yoga, everything uses breathing. And it's such a powerful tool to self-regulate. You don't need any kit. You don't need any subscription. And you need to learn to control your breathing. And that is a skill. So you need to learn it if you've never done it before. And I remember using it in patients. I remember having a patient who took, I don't know, 5 sessions because before she could actually use diaphragmatic breathing, because it was such a counterintuitive pattern to her. But once you master it, you have it everywhere with you. There's zero weight. There's zero skill decay. Once you have it, you know how to use it. It's like riding a bike.
Yeah.
So for me, in terms of return on investment, it's very, very, very high up there. You can use it for activating purposes. You can use it for relaxing purposes. And when you dive into the, let's say, the more advanced techniques of pranayama, so this is the yogic breathing. And when you look at, as I said, tactical breathing, all the breathing patterns that you find, for example, in meditation apps or in devices that help you to regulate your arousal, well, they all stem from pranayama techniques. And these can have so profound physiological effects, like really, really amazingly intense. And it's something that's completely untapped into by Western medicine, which I think is a shame. Because it's, as I said, it's cheap. You can use it everywhere. And so
can we just speculate on the reasons, just for fun?
They probably are many. I think it's something that you cannot commercialize, so you cannot sell. Because you can try and put a patent on a breathing technique, but since it's been written down before, chances of you being successful with that are very, very slim. So it's not, let's say, in a consumerist society, it doesn't represent a commodity that you can monetize. And people have this inherent bias about things that are easy and cheap, like, oh, it can't be good. And breathing is, it seems easy. It's not easy to master really arousing and calming on a short time scale is not easy. It requires practice, but it looks easy. And so I think that's why it's being dismissed. In Nestor's book, I think one of the things I really like about it as well is that he makes a parallel between his own experiences and what it has changed for him clinically and in his health and well-being. And then it's like he pulls like a bit of wool, and then he unclutters it. And then he goes back into the history, both culturally and scientifically.
But I talk a lot with doctors, medical practitioners, and my wife is a medical specialist herself. But it also seems that it's not in the culture of education and medicine. I think that honestly, some doctors. Recently, in the Netherlands, there is a group of doctors. They are called the Vereniging tegen Kwakzalverij. Doctors who, like try to.
The Association Against Snake Oil Sellers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they really think that it's all kind of bullshit because.
But that's short-sighted, because if you know physiology, you know that breathing can have profound effects. And that's also why some aspects, I mentioned the Wim Hof method before, but some aspects of pranayama breathing, you cannot practice if you have certain neurological condition. You cannot practice extreme hyperventilation if you have epilepsy or migraine, because it might trigger like an episode, because you change the let's say the chemical balance in your blood, you change the blood supply to the brain. And this has been, this is robust physiological science.
But why don't get it?
That I don't know.
Okay. So and now we are in high performance domain. Do you think that breathing is accepted? Breathing methods, for example, in the military and.
Yes, I think breathing is easier to sell, so to speak, than anything related to mindfulness or yoga, for example, because breathing is seen as a no-frills physiological process. And also because even with very short demonstrations, it's hard to master on demand. But if you guide people through a breathing exercise, even only once, they can feel the effect. And so it's easy to demonstrate why it can be a powerful tool.
Is there already research into military units?
Very, very few.
Okay.
A little bit, but very, very few. Because it's also a field where most practitioners aren't researchers, and most researchers aren't practitioners. And so you have to have, let's say, a sweet spot where both meet. And it's also difficult if you want in this kind, and this is something that we experienced as well in our project in the Belgian unit. At some point you have a choice to make, because you have a limited time and limited accessibility of your population, and you have to decide whether you privilege practice, so training people and attuning to their needs, or a research protocol. And in that case, we privilege practice just because, for ethical considerations, really, because the needs were so high, and we thought, okay, no, now we're going to focus on giving these guys what they need, and not necessarily taking the time to document everything we do. We documented some aspects, which allowed us to write it up afterwards. But there are a lot of aspects we didn't document, and that was part of it.
And you talk about a lot of breathing techniques also in the book, like slow-paced breathing, diaphragmatic belly breathing, tactical breathing, yogic breathing, and so on and so on. Centering, also very, very nice field of study. Do you have any favorite breathing technique yourself? Do you think that everyone should do this kind of breathing?
I find I find the one of the most powerful exercises when it comes to activating, like something that is allows to focus the mind, is Kapalabhati, the fire breathing in pranayama. But it's not something that you can practice without like having learned it. And as it's a form of hyperventilation, it's not advised to teach yourself at home with YouTube videos. I think what is called tactical breathing, which is basically box breathing, you know, the 4 times in, 4 times retain, 4 times out, 4 times retain, is a very accessible entry-level exercise. And what I find very powerful too is the way in which you can teach people to prolong expiration, and they notice that yes, it works better and better, and it has a profound calming effect to actually have this very deep exhalation where you completely empty your lungs, and when you realize that usually you don't empty your lungs, you barely exhale in normal life, and exhalation is really essential to health and well-being, as Nestor writes in his book as well. So I guess that's not an answer to your question, because I gave you 3.
No, it's great. What do you think of my prescription for myself? I try to breathe low, slow, through the nose. Now I forget something. Low, slow. So low, slow, light. And I've stolen it from another great one. And maybe you know this, is Patrick McNoon.
Yes. Yeah.
With a forward of James Nestor, and I tried it for many years now, and it works. Just for me, it's an NS1 study, but
I would like to add something to all people who listen. Please don't tape your mouth shut when you sleep.
No, also not with the how do you call it? Not because you also have tapes with the like the hole in it.
No, don't tape your mouth shut. That's really a bad idea.
Oh yeah?
Yes, I think Huberman should be sued for popularizing that.
But Nestor also did it, or not?
Yes, but it's something that actually will create more sleep apneas than it actually helps people. And sleep apneas will damage your brain. So not a good idea.
What can we do then against snoring and sleep apnea?
That is
yeah.
It depends on your anatomy. So you need to if you have an issue with regard to that, and if your sleep is non-restorative, and a sleep study, a polysomnography shows that it is related to apnea issues, then you're in deep trouble, because none of it has an easy solution. There are, and Nestor tells his journey as well, like with his dentist specializing in maxillofacial, let's say, correction. But taping your mouth shut will basically just create apneas. If you don't breathe well through your nose at night, it will not increase, because nose breathing is your natural way of breathing. So if it doesn't occur, depriving your brain of oxygen will not make it happen more.
Are there any good studies done on this negative effect on mouth taping?
I don't know if it has been published yet. I know there is a clinical consensus about it, because every sleep physician you can talk to, if you mention mouth taping, they will go like,
okay,
they're not happy with it.
That's interesting. Yeah.
But I don't know if there are publications available about it yet.
So now, before we go to the last topic of your paper, yoga, now we're into sleep, and sleep apnea, of course, is a very serious condition and so on. But what about, you study sleep a lot, eh? You studied sleep a lot, and say you cannot sleep because you are overactivated. Can I before that, can I give you what I know about sleep, and you can comment on that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, important with sleep, because I have sometimes sleep problems, I play a lot of emphasis on, let's say, rhythm. So going to bed around the same time and waking up at the same time. Rhythm, temperature. I try to have a cold sleeping room. What is cold, of course, you can. So that's cold. Yeah, I have to admit that I was influenced by Huberman, that when waking up, seeing some sunlight, and I think I have before I go to bed, I do some, so switch off time, not going from the television bang to bed and so on. What do I do more? I've become more cautious about caffeine. What do you think about these things?
I think it's very sensible. You were very right to mention rhythm first, because there's a recent review, I think it was published last year, about those long cohort studies linking sleep with morbidity and mortality, and it actually showed that rather than quantity, rather than sleep duration, it was regularity that was the main predictor of health when it came to sleep. Which is not surprising, because if you have a regular sleep pattern, it means that your daily life doesn't deprive you of sleep. Now, you know that we all have our biological clock with preferences with regard to circadian functioning. So some people are evening people, some people are morning people, some people are indefinite, like they don't have a strong preference for one time of day or another. If you're an extreme evening person, getting up in the morning is a pain. Going to bed at night is difficult if you have, let's say, a classical schedule with regard to work. And so it means that during the week, you're probably chronically sleep deprived. And so you make up for it in the weekends. But this basically you're constantly jet lagged.
Yeah.
You live in a jet lagged state, which is bad for your health.
Yeah.
So if you have a regular sleep pattern, it means that your occupation, whatever that may be, is well adjusted to your biological clock. So you don't have large discrepancies between work and rest days in terms of when you go to bed and when you wake up. So rhythm was definitely a good idea to start, because that's something really, really important. But it should be stressed that this is endogenous. So it's part of your genetic makeup.
Mm.
So you cannot, and to all teenage parents out there, you cannot force them to wake up earlier, because it's just
No.
not there.
Yeah, I know. I think, yeah.
But one thing you forgot in your overview, which was quite comprehensive, is alcohol.
Yeah, I don't drink alcohol, so that's why I forgot
Yes.
it.
So that's but that
Yeah.
has a very profound effect on sleep, and of course, with aging, you metabolize less efficiently, and so the effect becomes more prominent. Which is something all my people my age notice, that you don't sleep well anymore after a glass or two.
Yeah. And what about overactivation? Because I can imagine, I myself have, and my son also has a little bit trouble with that. Like it's more like rumination, overactivation, and but I can imagine that overachievers, and especially in military units, always the feet on the gas pedal.
Yeah, the hypervigilance that you create by this mindset and work situation, of course, is very deleterious with regard to, if you are, some people are vulnerable to this aspect with regard to their sleep, and some people are not. So there is a basic, probably genetic predisposition to this kind of vulnerability. If you are vulnerable to it, then you will know that it will impact you. Like if there is something big on your plate, if you're preparing for something, if you have something on your mind that you need to solve, then it will impact your sleep. Now, as you mentioned, the behavioral aspects of sleep hygiene are very important. It's like you cannot change this vulnerability. It will always be there, but you can try and contain it through behavioral measures. And yeah, sometimes it can be quite constraining. It's about rhythm. It's about, as you said, not keeping activated before bedtime. So you have to allow your brain to check out. Basically, and not reading annoying news, not opening your emails in the evening, because if someone sends you an annoying mail, then it will play on your mind the whole night. And so, but it is something that, and then we talked about the restorative techniques. Well, using these to try and keep that balance between parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system may play a role in that whole strategy. It will never be enough in itself, but it will be a meaningful building block of the whole, let's say, containment plan of the ruminating dragon in your head.
Yeah. The strange thing with me is that I have some periods when my sleep is off, and then comes the anxiety of not sleeping well, and that's
but that is, yes,
that's killing.
So that's the textbook example of insomnia. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna sleep, and so I'm not gonna function. And you know what? That's the core false belief that is targeted in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, where actually you can even sleep deprive people. It's an exercise, and tell them, and how did you function? And they were like, yeah, okay. Of course, not total sleep deprivation, but you perform sleep restriction, and people notice that the world is still spinning.
I'm a great fan of Ellen Langer. She's a Harvard psychologist, talks about mindfulness, did some great studies. She's 77 and she's still teaching. She did hundreds of studies, but also sleep time perception. So they told people, all these kind of people who didn't sleep well, they told you sleep very well, and they felt they felt very well.
Yes, placebo is a wonderful thing.
It's great, yes.
Which is why I'm not a big fan of, the quantified self, where everybody wears a watch and in the morning checks his or her sleep. What's the use? Do you feel rested? Yes, then all is well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. What helps for me personally, I come to when it goes on for 1 day, 2 days, the moment I say I don't give a the word I don't care, and then suddenly I sleep, well, okay, I'm not going to sleep, thank you very yeah accept and
Yes, and
commitment.
it's the perfect illustration. Basically, the anxiety of not sleeping is the sustaining mechanism of the insomnia.
And then we're back to mindfulness, because it means so much to me, because just knowing that all those anxiety goes up and down, and don't take it so seriously, that's a game changer.
Yes.
Yes,
you're witness to your emotions. You are not your emotions.
Yeah. That's so powerful, that insight.
Yeah, but that's the essence of mindfulness and meditation. It's like all this is happening inside me, but it doesn't define me. It's happening, and I'm witnessing it, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. But this too shall pass.
Yeah, that's a great book also from ouders. This too shall be great. Yeah. The last thing, yoga. Why did you place it on the end? Because it comprehends everything?
No, because it was my primary part, and because I thought, well, it brings it all together. It's about breathing, it's about relaxation, it's about mindfulness, and if ever there was a technique that is a lifestyle, because if I only discuss hatha yoga in the chapter, but actually I'm a yoga teacher myself. I regularly go to ashrams, to sustain my own practice and my teaching, and it's a way of life. It's about what you eat, how you eat, how you breathe, how you behave towards others in the community, in society. And so, of course, when we talk about yoga in the Western world, and especially in performance enhancement, we mean the postural yoga and the breathing, and not all the other aspects. But it's much broader than that.
But and that's exactly what I told you at the beginning, that I understand perfectly well why we separate those things and so on. But like you're saying, it can be so more than just a breathing exercise. But okay, we go. Should we call it tactical yoga? Is it better for acceptance?
I think, and it wouldn't resonate with people. And frankly, I don't care what it's called. I'm like, you know what? This is everything that is available. And if you want to dip your toe, and if you want to jump in, jump in. And because basically, if you are training people or coaching people or treating people, when it comes to mental performance, as we mentioned with the difference with physical performance, well, it all boils down to the joke about how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Well, only one, but the light bulb needs to want to change. And because it all boils down to that. And in every therapeutic intervention, you need a therapeutic alliance between the patient and the practitioner, or the client and the practitioner. even more so when it comes to mental performance. Because basically what you can give people, if you want to do it in an ethical way, which means not pose as a guru and not manipulate people, which I think is very important, then basically it's their choice. They either practice something or they don't. But all you can do is present, advocate, teach. But in the end, if they don't want to take it, they won't.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Netherlands, we have there are some great initiatives in the military. Soldiers teaching yoga. I'm not, what is your impression worldwide in other military units and countries? Is yoga or parts of it?
I have no idea how it's like worldwide. I can tell you there are structural programs in the Indian army, because this is also where the scientific literature stems from. And then it all depends, I think, on local initiatives. Because basically you need one motivated individual who will start something up, and it will work or it won't. And one of the things we also mention in the book, when it comes to how do you choose your practitioners to actually implement a program, is, well, you need people who have credibility in what they teach. I'm not going to teach something which I don't master myself. It's not a topic in which you can perform PowerPoint karaoke. And you know, this is sometimes quite popular in military organizations. Like, yes, the curriculum exists, the slides are there, now you go and give them. You're like, no, this is not how you teach people. You have to own the subject. You have to be able to answer questions beside the content of the slides. And that is about credibility and legitimacy as a teacher.
And to end this up, what is the best way? No, so there is. I will try to make a point. There is enough evidence for yoga being very healthy for body and mind in general in clinical populations. There is some research also in military units, by the way, because I found also this is from Amy Adler and Amishi Jha, for example. So even randomized control studies for those who won't need that. But so I think, and everything we talk about, what is the best way to implement it? Oh, this is such a big question. I'm so sorry.
You already we devote a whole chapter to
it.
No, I think the first thing is to adapt to your population. That is crucial. You cannot take your recipe for pasta carbonara in Italy and then move to India and expect to make the same pasta carbonara. Then you need, the people who implement it need to be credible experts. And that's something that the former RSM of our SOF unit, he had one like criterion for external experts to work with the unit, and it was like, are you the best in your field? Because we are the best in our field, so we want to work with the best in their field. And at first I was like, okay. But then I realized, yes, that's how every person you encounter will gauge you. Like, where are you on your ladder? Because it's a very competitive field. And so you have to have people who are credible and who are, because by definition, you will have people being critical and asking questions, which is good. Because if you want to convince people, you want them to think about it and to raise questions and to be like, what's in it for me? And so that you can actually demonstrate that it is useful. but which also means as a practitioner, you need to be comfortable with that. So that takes a bit of, let's say, experience and a certain mindset as well.
So we talked about just one chapter of the Handbook of Mental Performance, and it was a chapter about restorative techniques. And there were many more chapters in the book, also about how to implement it in elite units. But there is a whole part of scientific evidence base about self-talk, goal setting, neurostimulation, computer-assisted cognitive training tools. There is about biofeedback, where you're also an author, and then it's about implementing mental performance training in applied settings. So it's almost 400 pages. It's a wealth of knowledge. So thank you very much for editing this book and for all the wisdom and experience.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the conversation.
Did I forget to ask you anything?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot more in the book, but I don't think in the topics we covered there's something that we left open, which I feel would be a gap.
Yeah, great. So they can. It is a book from Taylor and Francis. So I will.
Routledge.
Yeah, precies. So I will put a link in the show notes. So thank you, and hope to talk to you again. I will end this conversation and say goodbye off the record. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Bye bye.